let's talk about fund accounting. Fund accounting is another essential element of financial management for the CoC programs. Essentially, fund accounting is a segregation of expenditures by funding source. For instance, a grantee must differentiate SHP's funds from state or local funds they receive. Grantees that receive multiple SHP or Shelter Plus Care grants must also differentiate between these grants by clearly identifying respective grant numbers and the associated costs to each respective grant.
Now, there are some common misconceptions of what fund accounting is, and those are actually found on page 8 of TDA's Fund Accounting Clinic manual, which is also attached to the emails that were sent to you. One misconception is taking a straight percentage of costs when federal principles require reimbursement for actual expenditures and costs incurred, for example, salaries, as discussed earlier. Another misconception of what fund accounting incorporates would be drawing down budgeted amounts regardless of what the actual costs are. Also, assuming that all SHP or Shelter Plus Care grants are the same and therefore charging costs against any available grant. Again, with fund accounting, you have a grant, you have specific units or specific activities that must be drawn down from that specific grant and no other grant. Another misconception would be using excess funds from a prior grant year when these funds are actually to be recaptured by HUD. So as mentioned earlier, when you have a grant that expires, that grant, there may be no more charges taken against that grant. So any costs that were incurred after that date must indeed be drawn down from the subsequent renewal grants.
The HUD Richmond CPD Office plans to conduct random voucher reviews during the fall of 2012 to ensure greater compliance to federal regulations.
Okay.
All CoC grantees should be keenly aware of the requirements and recommendations discussed in today's call and presented in any attached materials in anticipation for this upcoming review in the fall. Guarantees of all performance level will be considered for review, so anybody should not think that they're being singled out. It's going to be pretty much at a random pace. We'll treat this review similar to what we normally do for a final voucher drawdown, whereby we'd expect you to be submitting such documentations for expenses incurred.
In regards to final vouchers submitted after grant term has expired, most, if not all, grantees have experienced what we call a final voucher review at some point in time. This is when the grant expires and the grantees have remaining costs to submit for reimbursement. Essentially, the loss accounting system automatically suspends the grant upon expiration, whereby the CPD rep then requests support and documentation for grantee if they submit a request for a final reimbursement. To expedite our review, we ask the grantees adhere to the policy described during today's call related to 3 components of the voucher request. The CPD rep approves or rejects the voucher request based on his or her review of the submitted documentation. Keep in mind.
Another question was asked, can a grantee send us at HUD documentation to check in and see if they are maintaining the correct documentation? Absolutely yes. We encourage you to touch base with your CPD representatives at any given time during the course of the year to make sure that you're on the right track.
Keep in mind that in extreme cases where there are serious support and documentation issues related to a final voucher request, HUD may determine the need to review the grant in further detail, possibly even triggering a remote or on-site monitoring review.
Now at this time we want to pause and see if there are any questions while the dots are fresh in your mind. So if anyone has any questions on final vouchers, on random sampling that we'll do later this year, on fund accounting, on financial voucher documentation, if you have questions at this time, you can go ahead and ask them. Otherwise, we'll open the doors again at the end. Any questions? Okay, so moving forward, I'm going to talk a little bit about LOCS issues pertaining to the LOCS accounting system. And as Pearl just alluded to the LOCS system a moment ago, essentially the first thing that your organization wants to do or should do is ensure that you have at least 2 registered users in the LOCS system who can draw down funds. You never want to be in a situation where a sole LOCS user is not available for a period of time, which could lead to an inability to draw down funds. Which leads me to my next point. There is to be absolutely no sharing of LOCS. Could everyone please mute their phones? Thank you. There absolutely should. Okay. Does anyone know where that noise is coming from? We need to mute the phones, please. There should be no sharing, I repeat, no sharing of LOCS usernames or passwords among anyone. HUD takes this issue very seriously and has taken greater steps in the recent past to make users aware of the potentially serious penalties for such sharing. Obtaining a LOCS access username can actually take some time. So again, we highly recommend that you get 2 individuals, and we recommend that you start planning for that immediately if you do not have 2 individuals. Your approving official, which is usually the executive director or someone on the board of directors, that person will want to make sure to recertify all LOCS users annually, because that's another way that you could end up not having access. If they're not recertified, you lose access, and now you can't draw down funds. If you are the designated drawdown person, always ensure that you understand the costs that are being submitted, even if you're not on the programmatic team. Because when you log in and you draw down funds, you are certifying that the costs that you submit are indeed eligible, and you are taking responsibility for the legitimacy of the voucher.
Another area we wish to bring to your attention is the match requirement. Currently, under the SHP, we have a 20% supportive services cash match and a 25% operating cash match expectation. Acquisition, rehabilitation, and new construction all require dollar-for-dollar match. Cash match must not be from other CoC funds or from other prohibited funding sources as described in the regulations. Under the Shelter Plus Care, for every leasing dollar spent, you must provide a dollar worth of supportive services to the respective Shelter Plus clients. Equating match is often confused, so I'll provide a simple way to compute it. And this is our example. The match percentage is always a percentage of total line item budget. I'd like to emphasize that again. You need to be looking at the total line item. If the total supporting services budget is $10,000, then the match requirement would be $2,000 for that. The grantee would receive $8,000 in supportive housing program line item, and that would satisfy that match requirement. Keep in mind, in order to accurately document match, your supporting documentation must show expenses reimbursed under the grant as well as what is actual. So when you're talking about match, we are looking at expenses at a point in time. Match requirement will change once the match section of the HUD Act is implemented, but until then, we'll continue operating in our current format.
In regards to ineligible activities, just as Tom stated how important it is to actively provide and document match, you can never be too cautious about ensuring that the activities reimbursed under your CoC grants are indeed eligible. Your best friend for finding out eligibility should still be the existing SHP desk guide until a new guide is produced under the HOF Act. If you have a unique or complex eligibility question or just are unsure about the basics, we always recommend that you contact your respective CPD representative for guidance rather than risk funding an ineligible activity and having to repay the funds to HUD for the mistake.
Now, beginning in fiscal year 2008, HUD required that you do quarterly drawdowns. at least quarterly for your CoC grants. And now, please be mindful that drawing down funds at any rate slower than quarterly constitutes a finding, and that could ultimately jeopardize your grant if this is something that's done continually. Additionally, if it is possible for your organization, we recommend that you try to draw down monthly, if that is possible. Another item of concern recently is the grant closeout process. Now, when your grant expires, we have what we call the grant closeout process if there are remaining funds. We now reserve the right to close out the grant within 30 days of the expiration of your grant. The point of this would be, we don't want to have grants that are open 4 months, 5 months, 6 months after the expiration date because your subsequent renewal grant cannot be open at that time, and now you're behind with your quarterly draws, etc. So if you have remaining balances on a grant after the grant term, please contact your CPD representative, and then that person will go through with you the process of reviewing the expenses, drawing down that funding, and closing out the grants.
Thank you, Jay, for that detailed insight. Last but not least, we'll briefly discuss budget line item changes. Please be aware that, as always, any budget changes that affect 10% or more of any budget line item requires a formal grant amendment. And this grant amendment actually needs to be approved by CPD director. Anything that is less than 10% still requires a request from HUD, but does not require an amendment. Amendments are not necessary for anything that is less than 10%. The written request may be informal, and you can either send that by email to your respective HUD rep. Then we'll go ahead and make the changes in the log system.
Great, thank you, Tom. And thank you, Pearl.
Thank you.
So in conclusion, again, we want to get us all on the same page. We know that the regulations have been the same, but they are in the process of changing. As of January 1st this year, the HEARTH Act new homeless definition was implemented. So, we're dealing with adjusting to that. We're also moving forward in the next couple of years. We're going to be experiencing even greater changes related to the HEARTH Act. So this telecast is really meant to keep us all on the same page, get us moving forward, and focus on financial management. Next year we'll have a different focus, but we truly hope that that we all and that you all see this tool as a help, as a guide, and not as something that's meant for anything else. So at this point in time, we'd like to open it up. If anyone has any questions, any comments, concerns, either on the programmatic side, the financial side, on this forum, any kind of feedback, at this time we open that up to you.